Hey, Clayton, Deuteronomy 18 bans sorcery and witchcraft. So, where does that leave Harry Potter, Gandalf, and Elsa? Is enjoying magical stories just harmless fun, or are we dabbling in something we shouldn't? All right, I'm just going to say it. This one feels personal. Let me give you a little context. In Deuteronomy 18, the people are about to enter a land that is filled with occult practices, divination, sorcery, necromancy, magic, these sorts of things. In other words, this is a culture, a group of people that are trying to get in touch with spiritual realities so they can either predict or control their lives without having to trust in God. They're trying to get in touch with these powers to manipulate things for their own good. And the point of these passages in Deuteronomy and elsewhere is to steer people away from that sort of practice. They're not supposed to go to these forces and get in touch with these spiritual realities in order to gain something. They're supposed to depend on God for their life and trust and walk with Him. Now, the truth is this. We don't do it the same way in our day, but there are lots of people who are dabbling in these sorts of things here and now. Astrology, crystals, horoscopes, different kinds of new age magic, lots of things that are essentially trying to tap into the spiritual realities of the world and predict and control things. And God says, don't go there. A couple of reasons why this is problematic is one, it can put you in touch with evil spiritual forces. When you reach out to the spiritual reality and you get in touch with anything that is not named Father, Son, or Holy Spirit, you are getting in touch with the bad guys. You are getting in touch with evil forces. And even if it's masquerading as something that will be helpful or positive, uplifting, that is not the reality you're actually getting in touch with. Second reason this is a problem is this warps the way you posture yourself towards God. Magic and these sorts of things are essentially a way of saying, I need control. I want to be able to manipulate the world. But the way God invites us to interact with Him and the world is through dependence and trust. It is a relational connection with Him that gives us security in the world, not grasping and manipulation of spiritual forces. And so for that reason, God says, don't go there. These are warnings we need to hear today. But the question is, what about stories that portray those kinds of practices? What about stories that include magical elements? Now, this is a more complicated question than you might realize. It takes some discernment to figure out. So I'm going to give you 3 questions that you'll want to ask if you are engaging with a book or a movie or some kind of story that includes magical elements to discern, is this a good thing to engage in or not? First is this. You have to ask the question, what does this story mean by magic? Because when the word magic is used, it means different things in lots of different stories. And there are really 2 broad categories. Sometimes magic is described as getting access to spiritual forces, and other times magic is described as essentially an alternative physics. Think about it this way. If you are reading a story where someone summons a demon or a spiritual force and gets power through that, that is very clearly someone getting in touch with a spiritual force. If you are reading a book where it's sort of like magic is electricity or magnetism or just some sort of force in the world, it's sort of a way the world works, and some people have the ability to use that force to do practical things, then one is talking about spiritual realities, one is essentially an alternative physics. I think Harry Potter is a great example of alternative physics. When you read Harry Potter, it uses words like magic or sorcery or wizardry or those sorts of things, but there are no spiritual realities that they are getting in touch with. There are no demons, there are no spiritual forces that they are tapping into in order to do these things. Magic is essentially just another kind of physical layer of the world that some people have the ability to use. And so it's not really talking about spiritual realities at all, even though some of the words are overlapping with some sort of spiritual realities. Another story, and I realize this is going to be controversial, that's on the other side, is Star Wars. Star Wars has magic in it. You've got the Force and this sort of thing. But what's going on? They're actually getting in touch with a spiritual reality, which actually means that Star Wars is more suspicious than Harry Potter when it comes to spiritual things. Another story where things get in touch with spiritual forces is Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, the characters that can do magic, Gandalf, they get in touch with some sort of spiritual reality. Gandalf gets in touch with the creator God. That's the actual God of the world, the stand-in for the one true God. But Sauron gets in touch with dark spiritual forces. And so they're drawing their magic from different places, from spiritual realities. So magic is not just physics in that world, it's actually a spiritual thing. And so you've got to ask the question, in what way is this story portraying magic? What kind of magic are we talking about so that we can make the right judgments about that? Once you've figured that out, you need to ask the second question. Second question is, in what ways is this story involving me in participating in what it's doing? So there's a difference between portraying something evil and participating in something evil. All stories portray sin. Any story that's good is going to have some depiction of things that are not how they are supposed to be, things that are wrong, things that shouldn't happen. The Bible does this, right? The Bible vividly portrays sin. It depicts sin in all of its ugliness and evil, and there are really horrific things on the pages of the Bible. But that portrayal is not an invitation to participate in those things. It is actually saying, let's take the world as it really is and be sober-minded and clear about what's going on here. This is a question you need to ask about any story, a movie or a book that you are reading, about anything that is portrayed that is sinful. So a really clear-cut example of this is sexual sin. Sexual sin, it is a topic that can be touched on in books in a really healthy way. The author can talk about sex that we would say is out of bounds for Christians, out of bounds for Christian morality, and talk about it frankly, talk about the reality of it, talk about the experience of people engaging these sorts of things, and that might be a portrayal that is worth reading or hearing about. But when it crosses the line to actually inviting you to participate through your reading or through your viewing to fantasize about those activities or to relish or savor those activities or to view lustfully somebody, that is crossing a line of saying, I'm not just portraying sexual sin in some frank way. I am inviting you to participate in sexual sin through your engagement with this. And when it crosses that line, that's off limits. Same thing is true with violence. Violence is a part of the world. This is what's going on. And there are stories and movies that depict violence in a real way, in a way that is intense and hard to see and that sort of thing. But when it crosses the line, it's saying, are you relishing in this violence? Are you reveling in the pain or the gore of this, the suffering of these people? That's when it's inviting you not just to see a portrayal, but to participate in that. The same thing can be true about magic. If the story is portraying a kind of magic that is a participation in spiritual evil, okay, remember there's two different kinds, not alternative physics, but getting in touch with a spiritual reality. When it's portraying that, is it portraying it in a way that's making you say, I want to do that, or I should be drawn into that? Is it calling you, beckoning you to say, I'm going to somehow engage with that reality or long for that reality myself? If that's the case, that should be off limits for you. That's a line. Here's the third question. It's related to this one. What moral evaluation is the author making about the evil that's being portrayed? It's the difference between celebrating evil and being suspicious of evil. Some of what we're doing here is saying, if the evil is going to show up in a story, will the author guide me well? So this is true about any kind of evil. When it's sex outside of marriage, violence, these sorts of things we've already mentioned, but also things like greed. Right? Are we cheering on the person who's acquiring more, like, man, they're getting rich and they're just, rolling in luxury? Or are we saying, oh, man, this is really not healthy for them or for the people around them? Revenge. There are stories that make it so that revenge sounds so good. It's like, oh man, I just really, I'm like cheering them on, like, yeah, get them. Payback is really good. It's the what's that Carrie Underwood song? Before he cheats, she's smashing that guy's car, and you're like, yeah, smash the guy's car. Well, that's inviting you and saying this is a really good thing. Revenge is something you should cheer on. The same thing can be true about magic. Is getting in touch with this dark spiritual reality something the author is portraying as positive? Or is it them portraying it as something suspicious and evil? When there are portrayals where the bad guy is doing something bad and you know that they are bad, you don't need to put the book down or turn off the movie because they're portraying something evil when they're giving the evaluation of it as actually being evil. So those are the questions that I ask about this. What kind of magic are we talking about? Are they inviting me to either see a portrayal or participate in it? And what moral evaluation is the author making about the things that they have put in the book? Now, once you've answered those questions, it's not always clear-cut. Sometimes it's a matter of conscience. And the New Testament talks about this, Romans 14, different places, where there are going to be certain things that some Christians are going to say, I feel comfortable engaging with this. And others say, I don't feel comfortable. My conscience won't let me. And I say, for you and for your family, follow your conscience. Parents, you need to discern not just for yourself, but for your children, what level of maturity they have. When they're seeing portrayals of things, are they discerning enough morally to not be sucked into those things, to see it the way that it is actually being portrayed as something that's not good? You need to question those things, and people are going to come out in different places about this. I think the deepest question, though, is the question, how is this story forming your imagination? It's not actually about the absence or presence of particular details, but about the deep story that's going on. That when you go with the grain of the story, when your heart is given over to this, when your imagination is soaking in this world and in this narrative and with these characters, what does it help you grow to love more? What does it make you desire more? What does it cause you to see as valuable? How does it make you think the world works? What does it make you think is the good life? What do you want to chase after? And depending on the elements, even if some of the elements are somewhat neutral, they could be shaping your heart at the deeper level in the wrong way. Let me give you an example of this. The difference between the first Frozen movie and the second Frozen movie. Now, you may need to go back and watch these to see what we're talking about, but the first Frozen movie is the story of someone who learns to restrain their power through sacrificial love. Essentially, the self-expression that Elsa was making was destroying her world, and it's through sacrificial love that self-expression becomes an expression of love for other people. And so that is actually, the moral undergirding of that is a deeply Christian instinct. But the second movie flipped that on its head. It actually made the embracing of Elsa's power a quest for personal self-expression. This is a deeply worldly instinct. This is what the culture tells us. Be your true self, embrace authenticity. It's a deeply, what you might call moralistic, therapeutic, deist view of the world. And so those two stories that have the same magical elements in it, one is using it to say, at the deep structures, you are learning to imagine the world in a good way. And in the other, if you let that sink into you, you will imagine the world in a distorted way. Here's some other examples where this is done well. I know this is controversial for the people who ask this sort of question, but I actually think Harry Potter is one of those stories that does it really well. The story, at the heart of the story, and if you haven't read it, you might not realize this is all there. The heart of the big story is that there are two ways of dealing with the problem of death. Death is always haunting the story. One is Voldemort's way, through power and control. The other is dealing with death through sacrificial love and loyal friendship. That's what Dumbledore and Harry Potter's view of things are. And those two views of life, how do you grapple with death? By getting more and more power for yourself to somehow escape suffering? Or is it through sacrificial love and loyalty to your community that you face death? Those are the two realities that are being opposed. And one has a deeply Christian instinct at the heart of it. Another one that's really good is the Wingfeather Saga by Andrew Peterson. If you have not read these books and you've got elementary age or middle school, high school kids, these are books worth reading for you personally, worth handing to a young person who enjoys that kind of literature. The first book is really silly, but as the books go on, they get really deep, really rich, beautiful. An older set of books that I love that shaped my imagination really well with magic in them is a series of books called The Song of Albion. It's a trilogy by Stephen R. Lawhead that are worth checking out. Some stories, fantasy stories in particular, are uniquely effective at shaping your imagination because here's what they do. They get past your normal frame of reference where you already know how things work. They re-enchant the world and say there's more to reality than you think. They sneak past your rational defenses and make you say, oh, I'm going to ponder this not just with my mind but with my heart. This is why the modern fantasy genre was invented by two Christians, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. It was Christians who said, we're going to try and tell these sorts of magical stories for people because they knew there was a power to them that would shape you, not just in your mind, but in your heart. A book, if you want to read about that, there is a graphic novel by John Hendricks. It's a mature graphic novel, not meaning it has adult themes, but meaning it's not written for kids. It's a story, the history of the relationship between C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and how they wrote their books together. And it's called The Mythmakers. It's really, really good if you want to understand the heart of these kinds of magical, fantastic stories. Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.